What happens when you give a media personality and a sex therapist a podcast? You get Spill the Tea, a bold, unfiltered space where no topic is off limits, from sex and relationships to the messy, hilarious, and heartbreaking realities of life. Will Nash and Maria Orrego serve up real talk with expert insight, hot takes, and a whole lot of tea.
Of how we see the world and how different generations see the world is so interesting, especially when it comes to sexuality.
It really is. And I think that you see the differences in acceptance and also just even examples in the media, how certain identities are portrayed. But even like there's a difference in openness, I think, with people. Not always. Some people are comfortable sharing if they are outside of like what they consider to be the norm.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to bisexuality or fluidity, which is what we're talking about today, it's kind of a whole nother game.
I agree. Do you remember the first time you heard about like being bisexual? Because I know like we've all kind of grew up with like perhaps understanding the word like homosexual was like so big, especially in the 80s and 90s, right? But like bisexuality came out and I think it was like, oh my gosh, what does that mean? Do you remember like how old you were, like when you heard this phrase?
Well, first of all, I feel like the first thing that comes to mind is kids in like the playground calling somebody bisexual, or calling somebody gay or calling somebody bisexual. Like it happened, right? Back in those days, like it did happen in like the 90s, early 90s.
It was used in such a derogatory form. Like it was so mean the way that we used that word before, where I feel like now kids, if they were to use that, they'd be like, oh, great, thank you.
I know. Thanks for the compliment.
Yeah, like, oh, sweet.
So that's probably the first time I heard those sort of terms used. But I think that the first time in my real life, and while this might surprise some people, at one point, I had a girlfriend.
Congratulations.
Maybe a couple girlfriends. But my first girlfriend, I remember her telling me this, that she was into men, at the time boys, into boys and girls, into men and women, that she identified as bisexual.
And do you think you understood it? Like, do you think that when you're standing there, you're like 14, 15 years old, and this girl says to you, I'm bisexual, do you think you fully understood what that meant?
I mean, I think that I knew that it meant that she was attracted to like men or boys, because again, 16, and women, but I didn't necessarily know if that would like, was it like an equal situation, or was she like, with guys, but then also attracted to women? There was never a question in my mind. Again, you're 16, things are just so completely different. I mean, obviously, I was with a woman, so there's your first clue. Is what that meant in terms of us. Like I was just, you're just so, it's young love or young infatuation, right? So but I don't know, I think now there's probably a lot more people at that same stage of life saying that maybe more freely. I don't know.
I think so. I think before, again, like if you grew up in the 80s or the 90s, this idea of sexuality was forbidden, taboo, like not something that you would say out loud. It was very scary, right, to say any of this out loud. And then in the 2000s, we started getting like, I know that my high school had what they called I think they called it the Rainbow Club. And so,
right.
But there was like a handful of people in a school of like maybe 3,000 students. There was like maybe 5 or 6 of people that formed this club, which was so great that they did. But that was back in the day. Whereas now, yeah, of course, there's so much more freedom. There's acceptance. We're talking about it. We're understanding it. We also don't look down on bisexuality the way that we grew up in, right? We grew up in an era where bisexuality was seen as a phase, or you weren't committing to one or the other.
I would be so like, I don't know. I feel like if a friend of mine told me that they were bisexual, and whether, wherever they were coming from, whether they were, a woman with a woman, a man with a woman, like whatever it was, I think I would feel a very similar way into someone opening up to me about them being gay. Like I'd feel very much like I just wanted to give them like a big hug and like, thank you so much for feeling comfortable telling me this. Cause I feel like, not that I can't ever came out as bisexual, although you know, I mean, I did when I was trying to figure things out, I did kind of use a bit of leverage with that. And I think that this is a thing that a lot of gay people do. I don't want to speak for all gay people, but where it's like, okay, you know, you're attracted to a male, you know, whether that's someone on your TV screen when you're young or whatnot, or you know, but then if you see a girl who is attractive or pretty or beautiful, it's almost like, oh, okay, like it's not. In those days, it was more so not as bad because you're into both, right? I know that sounds so funny to say, but that was kind of the justification. And a lot of like, there's studies that actually show a lot of people who end up identifying as gay initially will not even come out, but just kind of compartmentalize themselves as being bisexual because it feels less of a big announcement to the world. Does that make sense?
Oh my gosh, of course it does, because it's so scary, right? If you think about it, which again, I can't believe that we're still like 2025, we still think about having to come out in your sexuality as a scary thing, or that people will judge or think there's certain things about you. But it is a scary thing to say sometimes. And so coming out in, like whether you're bisexual or like fully gay, yeah, it can be kind of an easier way to say. But I will say though, bisexuality is also somewhere where you can stay. It's not a step towards being gay. You can just be bisexual, and that can actually be your identity, right? And I think that's where you and I, in our generation of how we grew up, we were told it was a step towards being gay. We were told that it was a phase towards committing to be gay or not gay, and it wasn't seen as a final stop.
I still have people, and let me just put this on record that I don't believe that it is a step towards being gay. All that I was saying for myself and other people I know who identify as gay now, when you're trying to figure out who you are, as we do when we're young, right? Kids, teenagers, and whatnot. That was sort of one thing that made it seem not as much of a proclamation. I mean, it's really weird to talk like this when, like, at this point I've been out for years and I'm an adult and whatever, and I kind of it's like revisiting all those feelings in this therapy session with Maria. But it's one of these things where it's like, I know, and I don't mean that to say that it's not a stop. Like it can be a stop for a lot of people and is a stop for everyone who wants it to, like, it feels comfortable in that way is what I'm trying to say. But I know a lot of gay men went through that too. It's just kind of being like, okay, well, if I like, this guy, it's okay if I like her too. And then well, then how do the questions come up? Or how do you know the difference between, like, wanting to be with the guy and if you find her girl attractive, and it's like, it's just different. Like, you just know, you just feel it. And I mean, I think that one of the things I was going to bring up too, you were talking about in your school, because we're a few years apart, not incredible, but a few. And you had a club, like a rainbow club or an LGBT club. And I'm seeing it now, like, in the school systems also. And I think it's wonderful. I don't remember that ever really being a thing, like when I was in school. And I really, even the people who were gay, lesbian, queer, bisexual, whatever, it was almost like a speculation thing for a lot of us, more than it was someone being loud and proud about it. I think that there was maybe one or two that I can kind of think of, which again, I think probably is why not everyone, I did come out later in life. But there are people who have come out even later than I have. But I think that not having those resources and not having, someone maybe in your family that is out, or someone that you feel you can talk to, is the hardest thing.
Yeah, I think that's, again, the beauty of the generation that's coming up now, because I do actually work with a lot of clients that are in their 60s and even 70s that are coming out now, right? And because they weren't allowed to. And so they're in these like 30, 35, 40-year-old marriages to a opposite sex, and then they come and they realize I'm close to retirement, like close to the end of my life or whatever
Yeah.
that looks like for them. And then they realize I've been holding this secret in. I have never been allowed to say it out loud. And yet now we're allowed to, and we can express our sexuality. And then they're faced with that question of like, do I tell the person I've been married to for the last 40 years that I've been living perhaps a bit of a lie, right? And I've been living a double life where I'm actually attracted to both and
Hmm.
or all or everything, right?
Hmm.
It's a scary thing. I think what's lovely about the generations that are coming up now is that there is less fear to actually be yourself. Whereas, as you can see, even in the years that you and I have
Yeah.
difference, you didn't have a club, but I did. But it was hard to get. Like I do remember many of my friends having to fight for that club to be accepted as part of our like school club
Well,
curriculum. But now, I mean, no one would say no to that, right?
Well, I think that's the thing too, when it comes to whether it's bisexuality, being queer, being a lesbian, being trans, let's not forget the trans community,
Yeah.
please. And it's like having those few people that you speak of say it loud, say it proud, and be willing to put themselves out there. I mean, that makes me emotional. And it makes me emotional thinking about people who are in their 60s, 70s, coming out I'm glad that they are on that journey and working towards it. But it's also, it can feel isolating, right? And I mean, I can't speak for someone necessarily in the bisexual community, but as a whole, I think that in the LGBT community, it can feel isolating. And that's why when you have that support, the person doesn't have to be gay. The person doesn't have to be the same identity as you are. That's why, having people who support you and stand up for you means so much. And I think that goes with anyone, really in any community.
I agree. I fully agree with that. The support, the love, the ability to talk about who you are and having those people around you that really know you is such an incredible part, especially when you are talking about your sexuality, because it can
Wow.
be a scary thing to talk about, right? Especially as you get older, I think.
I think the thing is too, is like, I know in my career when I've been lucky enough to have these platforms where I can, I was able to come out on air well after I had came out, but just I was able to share my story. I am able to, say things in support of the community. And I probably do it in the way that I have done it because I didn't feel, and I hope this doesn't hurt anyone who, I grew up with or who's in my family or whatnot, because I know I was holding a lot of things inside, is like the support on a huge level just wasn't there. And I think it's more so to do with the way of the world. You say you've seen the changes. And I think that it's, to go back to bisexuality, I think it's only now that a lot of people are actually acknowledging the fact that no, it's not a phase. It's not just like the whole like I kissed a girl and I liked it. It's because it always goes back to that, right? It always goes back to that. But it's more like, yeah, like in the same way that I'm telling you, Maria, I'm gay. It could be somebody sitting here saying, Maria, I am bisexual. And you know what? I might date a man, but I might date a woman.
Yeah, it's true. But there's that weird assumption though that if I were to tell you that I'm bisexual, there's a weird assumption in the world that then I should be with dating a woman, right? And yet if I'm seen with a man, it's like,
Yep.
wait, I thought you were bisexual. It's like, yeah, I'm bisexual. I never said I was a lesbian. Like, why is there the assumption that if I'm with a man instead of a woman, I'm not doing it right? Like,
I know. It's like, are you
how I
supposed to have like
fail,
one on each arm? Like, it's supposed to have one on each arm. Like, that's the thing, right?
right?
What do
That
you
would make more sense than being just with a woman, right?
What do you think? And I'll share what I think afterwards if you want me to. What are your thoughts on the whole idea where it's like identifying as a woman being bisexual versus identifying as a man and being bisexual?
Oh,
In terms
okay.
of just the challenges or the differences or just from an acceptance level, those sort of topics.
You know what? I actually really appreciate that question because I don't think this is actually talked about enough. And there is a really big difference between a female, like saying she's bisexual, and a male saying that he's bisexual. Women when they say they're bisexual, a man or a woman will accept that, in the sense of like a man will still want to be sexually active with her if she's bisexual, and vice versa, right? Another woman will want that. When a
Hmm.
man says that he's bisexual, unfortunately, many straight women, and please don't come at me, but I know people are going to come at me for this, many straight women will actually not accept that. They don't want to have a sexual relationship with a man that has had sexual relationships with both. And I find that so interesting, but it's actually something that a lot of bisexual men do struggle with, because when they do want to engage with a female
Hmm.
and they say they're bisexual, they're actually judged, and they are shamed for the fact that they also have sex with men. It's a
Is
very
it
interesting dichotomy.
is it for these, and again, it's really so hard for us, we're always dancing around the generalizations, right? And I mean, you're speaking from experience and people who I'm sure have shared things, but is it the fear of being, as a woman, the fear of being with a bisexual man, that he will just leave you for a man, or no?
No, I actually don't think it is that. I
Oh,
think
okay.
it's more so just it's having, so not all, like, I will be very clear, it is not all
I
women.
know.
It is not all women. Not all women think this
Yeah.
way. However, if you are most, how do I say this carefully? A heterosexual woman
Yes.
with a bisexual man, there
Uh-huh.
is a bit of a barrier for them sexually, because that person has experienced sex with another man. There still is that weird sense of, I would even call it homophobia, where they
Wow.
can't get
Okay.
over that. I do think that there's still a little bit of that residue of, because
Hmm.
you're with a man, I don't know if I can be with you as a woman. It's a very strange phenomenon. And again, it's not talked about, which is why
No.
I'm bringing it up, because I do think it's important that we address it, because there's a double standard there.
Is it, and I'm sorry, I'm not picking you apart, I'm just trying to understand it. Is it a situation of the heterosexual woman with the bisexual man, you know, is intimate with him, and then is it an insecurity thing of feeling like, okay, if he's been with a man, maybe this won't be this won't maybe live up to what he's had with the same sex?
Could be. It definitely could be. I've heard also stories that, unfortunately, like, bisexual men have gone like online dating, like we've talked
Yeah.
about, but or they'll go online dating, they'll say that they're
Mhm.
bisexual, and then they go on these dates, and these women more so take the date as like, now I have a gay best friend.
Oh
Instead,
God, that's so cringy. Oh, I hate that. I hate that. I hate that. I hate that. I hate that.
but that's what happens, right? Because they assume it's like, oh, you're bisexual, which means you also have like this life kind of personality, let's call it, right?
Yeah,
And then they go on these dates, and these men are like, just because I'm bisexual doesn't mean that that's all I think about, or that I want to go with men. If I wanted to go on a date with a man, I would be on a date with a man. I am trying to have this conversation with you. And they find that that dynamic shifts pretty quickly. And I've heard this from
that's
many bisexual men, and it is a very hard phenomenon. And many have actually said, do I just stop identifying as bisexual when I go out with a woman, but then I'm lying to her,
yeah.
and I don't want to lie to her, right? I want to be able to be open and fluid with my relationships and with my sexuality. But how do I do that when I'm judged or shamed, or even then just taken as the gay bestie?
It's so funny, like, not funny, haha, but interesting in the sense of like that, you think this, because you're using the bisexual man and the heterosexual woman as the example, as a prototype here. I could only imagine, going out with a woman as a bisexual man and being, say, brave enough to early on open up that part of yourself to that person, and
Mhm.
then kind of having that reaction, because then maybe like the guy's thinking, I probably should have just like not said anything, because like it maybe it's a situation where he knows that he will end up with a woman, there's just attraction to men.
Yeah. I want to back up for a second, though. Your reaction to my idea of the gay bestie please tell me why there was that visceral reaction of how cringy that is. What's your take on that? Of every woman wanting a gay best friend, please tell
I
me.
I think I just no listen. I have several female friends. I have several, I have a close group of girlfriends who, might refer to me as their gay best friend, right? But I think I hate the fact that somebody would be on the hunt for that, if that makes sense. It's like I think about any of the close friendships that I have, close relationships that I have, and I would like it just feels like you're kind of checking off a box in that way, right? Do you know what I
Oh,
mean? It's like
well,
one of
I
those things
fully
where it's like I feel like yes, I'm gay. And yes, that's a part of me. But there's also other parts of me too that hopefully, if we're really close, we're not just going to talk about one topic, whether I'm friends with a male or a female, straight or gay or bi or trans or like whatever it is, right? It's just, I think when I hear, because I have heard it, like I've heard, it's like I've even kind of made fun of it, like online, where it's like, there was like a reel that was going around where it's like, we're best friends, aren't we? Like, it's just kind of like, so
But
I had
we
to make
were
fun of it
raised
for that.
on that though. Remember, like again, 90s, 2000s, like Will and Grace, the TV
Mm-hmm.
show, or what were some of the other ones? Oh my gosh, now I'm like fully blanking on them. But we had the Sex in the City. Carrie Bradshaw had her like gay bestie on that show as
Yes.
well. Like we were raised on that idea of like trying to find that checkbox friend of
Before I get into trouble with some of my girlfriends, and I probably will because I usually do whenever I post anything that's like making fun of them, is let me say, where would we be without them, right? Where would we be without these women who have been there for us and supported us when nobody would or nobody was willing to, support us? I think it's not so much because I'm very thankful for my best friends because I don't consider myself to have like one best friend. And again, that might get me into trouble too. I have a bunch of different very best and close friends that just bring me different things in my life, right? Um but I think it's the hunt for one, which is that's where I just cringe, right? I don't know why. And, let me know, send us a DM at the Spill the Tea pod and let me know if I'm off in this one. I think it's just like I don't know. That's my thought on that. That
I
was
love it.
my
So Will is not looking for a bestie right now, is what is what we're gonna conclude
I
that.
no, you know what? I always and let me tell you, these best friends, these best girlfriends who are, with sorry, these girls who are friends with a gay man and they consider themselves the best friend, like these girls are in competition with one another, with me.
Are.
They are in competition, and the questions that I get asked, or oh, what are you doing tonight? Oh, I'm going to such and such's place. Oh, yeah, she's seen a lot of you lately, eh? And it's like it's a lot easier, honestly, to be close with like straight guys than it is girls because they don't care. They're just like, okay, like I love you, you're awesome, but I mean, there's no thing like that. Yeah, so it is true. It's
Okay, the question
they're in
was,
competition with each other. I
okay,
know this is kind of going off the rails now, but
no, I love it though, because I'm gonna bring it back for a second. If you identified as bisexual, do you
Mhm.
think that it would be the same? Do you think you would be faced with the same kind of dilemma and the same jealousy? Like if you were said you were bi instead of the gay
um,
bestie, what do you think?
I don't know. I mean, maybe because in the sense that I feel like not everyone, but a lot of women who are straight are going to have a different relationship with a straight man versus a man in the LGBT community, right? Because I can have a girlfriend come over to my place tonight and, pour her heart out about whatever is going on or even just hang out. And I'm going to give her, I think a lot of it has to do, to be truthful, I think it has to do with energy. Right. I think a lot of it has to do with the being comfortable. And that's why women are comfortable with gay men because they're not going to let their guard down in the same way with a gay man that they do with a straight man.
Okay. I like
I mean, I don't know. It's just kind of like, it's interesting, right? I mean, I don't, but with all this being said, I'm not, shutting out new friends. I'm not shutting out new female friends. I'm not shutting out new male friends, gay friends, straight friends. I am very blessed in the sense that I have, and I feel like over the last, and again, maybe this is going off topic, but the last several years, I feel like I've really kind of learned who my, it's taken that this long, who your true friends are. Because when you go through some things, you really realize that.
That's a great point. And actually, that leads into our spill the tea question perfectly. So I'm going to go for it. I'm going to tell you what our
Yeah.
okay. So, female in her 20s, she says she came out as bisexual recently, and while her queer friends are accepting of it, my straight friends keep saying things like, well, if you end up with a guy, it doesn't really count, right? Her question is, why do people still act like bisexuality is only real if you're dating the same gender?
The first thing that comes to my mind is I think that people think bisexuality is only real if you're dating the same gender, is because unfortunately, to many people, appearances are absolutely everything. And I think that that's an example for me when it's taking it too far. Because you could have a couple, male, female, say the male is bisexual, and maybe that's something that he's never publicly shared, right? Um, but no one's gonna think of them as the bisexual couple, or like it's like they're gonna think of them as a straight couple unless they have that insight to their relationship or that insight to his identity. And I think that people have a really hard time believing things they cannot see or they do not know.
I agree. And it's awful the fact that people think I always I I find it interesting how when someone identifies as bisexual and they're dating either the opposite sex or the same sex, it really doesn't matter. There's always that like, well, he could leave you for a man or she could leave you for a woman. And it's like, yeah, but if I'm in a heterosexual relationship, he could also leave me for another
Wow.
woman.
And it's
Right.
and it's funny, yeah. I've had those conversations with again other girlfriends, other close friends, when I've shared the fact that maybe they didn't know me when I came out, because again I came out when I was in my early 30s. Um, you know, what would have happened if you would have ended up dating a girl? What would have happened if you would have gotten married to a girl, and then you would have been like lying to her? If you did that, yeah, I would have been lying to her, and like, but at the end of the day, I will never not feel for someone who is going through a struggle, and for whatever reason they feel like they can't voice that, right?
Agree.
Um, I don't know if I'm sorry. I feel like that doesn't really add up to what we were talking about, but that just kind of came through my mind, and that's why I said it when I did.
No, I love that. I think that was like just like a really heartfelt moment of you saying that, right? That idea of like people needing to know, like, and to accept who you are, and the fact that you struggled with that too, right? You don't want to lie to yourself, you don't want to lie to other people. And at the end of the day, I think any sexuality or any like sexual
Hmm.
journey, right? Like we said many times, it's fluid, it can change, it can evolve. You can learn more about yourself, you can learn more about the people around you. You can also find yourself in love with someone that you never thought you were going to fall in love with, but then you do, right? And it doesn't matter. It's so much more complex than gender or sexuality. It just becomes like something magical, right? And it doesn't
And
have to
it's
be something that's defined in that moment.
you can never I don't think you can control who you fall in love with, right? I think you can control acting upon it or sharing that with people, although not easy. I think that you can't control who you connect to. You can't control who you fall in love with. And emotions are real. And I know that we've all been there, and I'm sure you have been there too, where it's like you feel them stronger some days than others, and it could be for a number of different reasons, right? I mean, there's been times where I've been upset about something or I've been into someone, and I had to take a step back and be like, okay, you know what? I'm really feeling this today, but today would not be the day to share that because I'm tired or I'm, feeling emotional. And I think that it's having some self awareness too, but you can't control that.
No, you can't. There's a story I really love, and I think I have, I'm not going to look back, but I think I have her book right behind me.
Mm.
Glennon Doyle, who's an author, she writes about how the the day that she met her wife, her now wife,
Yeah.
in person was at a conference, and she just saw her wife walk in. Like, obviously at that point, it wasn't her wife. She saw this
Yeah.
woman come in out of nowhere, and Glennon Doyle at that point didn't identify as gay.
Mhm.
At least I don't think so in this part of her story. And so this woman walks in, and she just said, like, she just magnetically was attracted to her all of a sudden. And there was just like this like beautiful love that grew. And maybe she was never expecting that. And maybe it was not something that she never thought it would actually happen. And now they like live a beautiful life together. But all that to say, this idea of who you fall in love with, who you're attracted to can change, can evolve. There's also these moments where we have no idea where it's coming from, but it does. And it's beautiful. And that's okay. Right. So back to kind of like that idea of the question here of
Mhm.
why is it only real if you're dating the same gender? It's not. You can be anything under the sun, under the rainbow, and identify however you want and be in a relationship however you want. And as long as you're actually being true to your like real, honest identity for you, I would say, and this might be mean, screw your friends.
100%. Screw your friends, screw your family, screw everyone who's not going to support you. Because I'm not trying to bring it back to myself all the time. We talk about this, but it's like, I know so many people who have not been supported when they've came out as gay, lesbian, bisexual, trans, whatever. Like you said, whatever under the rainbow, under the sun. And I actually read something recently where it's like, even if you are accepted by your family and your friends, there is some connection that you will have to your friends in that community that you're also a part of, where you just feel you can like, even if they're not physically with you, you can just feel that connection and feel that support. Also, they've kind of probably walked through a similar walk that you have walked through. So they understand the anxiety, the emotions, the feelings, like, yeah, like it's not easy. Not to say that, because there's so many people who, like you said, don't even ever share that part of themselves. And you don't have to necessarily come out, but it's nice to be able to come out to yourself.
Exactly. But I love what you said about that community aspect, because there is that beautiful level of understanding, right? When you do have a shared experience, a shared story, even though it's not everyone's is the same, there is that that level of community that just goes so much deeper with the people that have experienced something very similar to you. I love that. So Will, what's your last tip for today on bisexuality
Oh boy.
and all the
It's like bisexuality and all of the little nuggets. That's like, what else do we call this one? Be true to yourself. And, if you're feeling something for a reason. But be true to yourself and be kind to yourself as well.
Oh, I love that. Yes. Always be kind to yourself. I think my last tip will just be kind of like adding to yours. Give yourself grace to not know the answers and to figure it out and to stumble and fall and get back up 100 times before you actually know the answer to this end of the road kind of life that we have. So yeah, I love that. Be kind to yourself, give yourself grace. Yeah.
And I think even the other thing I'll say is, like, if you actually come out however you come out, maybe it's bisexual, maybe it's not, maybe it's something else, it's, even though you've said that, it's going to take you even longer to really know yourself.
Yeah, I agree. I love that. Well, thanks, Will, for the great conversation on bisexuality
Yeah.
and all the other nuggets, like you
In all
said.
bisexuality and all the other nuggets today. And that's a tea.
That's it for this episode of Spill the Tea. If you loved what you heard, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and follow us for more candid conversations. Got a burning question or topic you want us to cover? Slide into our DMs. We're always here to spill the tea. Follow us on socials at the Spill the Tea Pod, at Will Nash on Air, and at Sex Off the Pedestal.